Okay, we're doing the next section in this book here, Hidden History of Nutrition, Health, and Science by me, P. Rogers. We're going to be talking about the history of science. And now, on my channel, I'm going to tell you the truth, okay? And the truth is, multiculturalism is nonsense. The modern scientific method came from the Roman Catholic Church. This is well known. There's lots of books on this. Anybody who studied it and is honest about it knows it came from the Catholic Church, okay? It really got going with Thomas Aquinas, Albert the Great in the 1200s, and that led to the European university system run by the Catholic Church. They all spoke Latin. The professors can go back and forth from the different countries because everybody spoke Latin at the universities. The clergy all did the Catholic Mass in Latin. Latin was the universal language of the Roman Catholic Church and of educated people. You know, over 30 craters on the moon are named after Jesuit priests. Okay, so it was all these Catholic scholars and, you know, the professors, even in the, late 1800s, you still had to be a Christian even to be allowed to be a university professor in England, just as an example. I say all these things so you can have a little perspective on it, because people will try to tell you, oh, such and such a country was advanced in science. Oh, BS. Compared to Europe, the other countries are a joke in science. It's just a fact. And it's so easy to prove. You can prove it in 5 seconds. This little tiny country, Britain, this tiny crappy little island of a country ruled the world in 1800. Basically, it had lost the rev with 1776 with the USA, but it had controlled the USA up until that point. And if it had been nice to the USA, it would have kept its control. In 1850s, they basically beat the crap out of China because their technological superiority was so far behind China. That was the whole China Opium Wars and all that stuff. They were controlling this massive country of India because India was totally backward at that time, okay? It's just a fact. You don't have to take my word for it. You can just open a book. Everybody knows this. This little tiny country of India, it was controlling large areas in Africa. It's controlling India. It kicked Russia's butt in a war, okay? The Crimean War, all right? It kicked Spain's butt, this little tiny place. It kicked France's butt, this little tiny place of Britain. And why did Britain control the whole world? Because of the Industrial Revolution in Britain, and it had technological superiority over all of these countries because it had superior scientific method and achievement. That's just a fact, okay? And I'm also going to say something too. All this stuff about male-female equality, it is not true. And what I mean by that is men and women were different. Up until the 1960s, women did not have birth control. The average woman in Victorian England in the 1800s had 10 to 15 babies. She had 10 to 15 babies. She didn't have time to go to the bathroom by herself, yet alone be a leading scientist. Okay, let's be honest about it. And that's why if you read the history of the world, you almost never hear anything about a woman up until, after the 1960s. There's a few geniuses that stand out here and there. Ayn Rand, magnificent writer, one of the best writers in the world, in the USA around the 1950s, 1960s. Okay, you've got Ann Coulter in the modern world, this writing genius, okay? But Agatha Christie here and there. You've got Madame Curie here and there. But they're the exceptions to the rule. There's almost no females anywhere in history and cultural achievement. If you took the top 1,000 artists, there wouldn't be a single female in them. You took the top 50 composers, there wouldn't be a single female in them. So women didn't start, even being significantly involved in these types of things until after they had birth control. Nowadays, a woman has an average of 1 or 2 kids, and they got a lot of time on their hands. They can do other things. But historically speaking, they did almost nothing of a major, top-notch, world-class level in science, painting, or art. There's a few tiny little exceptions here and there, but not much. Okay, and what I also want to say is, like I said, it came from Europe. Okay, it didn't come from anywhere else, and you don't have to take my word for it. Just look it up yourself, all right? And a lot of times people say, oh, in the Muslim countries they had so-and-so and so-and-so. Most of the work done in the Muslim countries was done by the dhimmi, okay, the controlled, captured people. Because a lot of these places, they banned the printing press for 300 years in most of the Muslim world, okay, and what is now today Europe. Okay, they banned the printing press. How are you going to spread education if you ban the printing press for 300 years? Okay. All right, so anyways, this is all well known. You can look up, you can go to Wikipedia, which is an extremely anti-Christian site, and it still has list of lay Catholic scientists, list of Catholic clergy scientists. Go to catholicscientists.org and you'll see there's tons of them. And the best ones, the better they were, the more religious they were. Okay, and actually right now in the modern world, what do you see? The billionaires who run the world are trying to get rid of Christianity, especially the Christian men, especially the white Christian men. And the more they destroy them and mistreat them and abuse them, the more the world goes into the shitter. Pop culture right now is disgusting. You go into a modern art museum, what do you see? Statues of turds, urinals, paint splashed on the wall. This is a joke. This is a mockery of Western civilization. But the proles are too stupid to complain about it, okay? It's a disgrace. If an Italian Renaissance, a neoclassical person, or even a person from Romanticism came into the modern world, they saw our art museum with feces, statues of feces, urinals, paint splashed on a wall. They say these people are the scum of the earth barbarians. They would have complete contempt, rightfully so. All right. You go in, and it's not just in the art museums. You go into some building anywhere in Western civilization, and there'll be these fake modern art paintings on the wall. Why do people do that? I would never put that on my wall. It's a disgrace and an insult. You know, put a statue of a turd or splash paint on a wall. You know, it's an insult to your intelligence to have that on the wall or to tolerate that on your wall. Okay, but it's a sign of the feminized low IQ of the Western male. Testosterone levels are in the dumpsters. Sperm counts are in the dumpster. Reproduction's in the dumpster, because everybody's pushed out and accept this nonsense narrative. Okay, it's just a fact. Western civilization largely means Christian civilization. Up until 1850, virtually all of the scientists were white male Christian scientists. Okay, there was almost no one anywhere else doing anything. You know, between 1850 and 1900, you started seeing a few other ethnic groups getting involved, and in the 1900s, progressively, other ethnic groups have gotten involved. Yes, that is true, but that is a new thing, okay? The Catholic Church in the Middle Ages, it preserved the great books of the ancient Greeks, the Romans, and the Bible. No one else gave a rat's ass. All of these other cultures, they're so backward they didn't save anything from the Greeks, the Romans, and the Bible. Anybody who studied ancient world knows the Greeks were totally superior to any other backward culture. Almost every single culture since the beginning of recorded time, you have some tyrant, dictator, despot who says, do what I say or I will kick your butt. And after they say that, no one's allowed to do anything. You can't ever contradict anything or you get your butt kicked, okay? And when you don't have free speech and anytime you try to create something new, you get your butt kicked, nobody wants to create anything. In Mandarin China, they had his great sailors, names like Cheng Ho. He made boats that could have sailed the oceans, and the Mandarin said, no, we don't need to communicate with other cultures. They destroyed his boats, and they wouldn't let anybody else make boats of that type. So China could never have a Columbus and sail to the New World. Okay, they could never have a navy like the British because they destroyed all their boats. And so then Britain comes over there in 1815 and kicks their butt, even though they're massively outnumber Britain. Okay, in China, they had developed gunpowder. They had developed some early versions of metallurgy with ironworks. The Mandarin said no, and would take everything away from the inventors, the innovators, so nobody could do anything. The Mandarins would not let them. Okay, they still had cannibalism in China. They had cannibalism in South America. They had cannibalism in lots of other places. They had cannibalism in Africa until at least 1900. They had cannibalism in Mexico. Okay, they were still sacrificing thousands and thousands of people every year and eating their bodies, okay? They're freaking backwards. All right, this is not equality of cultures. Those are primitive societies. And the people who colonized the United States, they were not immigrants. They were settlers, okay? They were coming to a wild frontier. It was basically a wide open space. There were very few Indians here and there. And the Indians that lived in the USA, when the settlers came, like from England and from France, they just had sparse little teepees here and there. They were illiterates. They did not have a sophisticated culture. The land was not occupied. The Christians from Europe brought civilization to the USA. That's just a fact. You can look it up. Matt Walsh has an extended video on it. Lots of people have. The Indians in the United States, when the settlers came from Europe, they had slavery. They were in constant civil wars. They were brutalizing each other, scalping each other. They would raid each other, steal their women, and then you know what comes next. There's APE their women and take them as slaves. Okay, this was widespread and it's well known. All right, anyways, the Catholic Church out of the Middle Ages preserved the great books of the Greeks and the Romans and the early Christians in the Bible. No one else gave a rat's tail. They developed farming and metallurgy. They made that's why there was a great expansion in population, because they were generating so much more food. Nowadays, what you're seeing is Muslim society is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger because they're having lots of babies. Okay, whereas the Christians are only 1 or 2 kids, where the Muslims still have a big family. Why? Because they got the woman at home having babies instead of out in public, doing all the things Christian women are doing these days, going on OnlyFans and making a circus of themselves. Okay, divorcing all their husbands, breaking their families apart, not having kids. They developed farming and metallurgy. The Roman Catholic monasteries were the places of experimentation in science through the Middle Ages. They made the first modern universities, Roman Catholic Church, the first large-scale charities, the first hospitals that would take care of poor people. No one gave a rat's tail about poor people other than the Catholic Church. In ancient Rome, they'd let the poor starve and die. They'd say they deserved it. Even Plato, the great philosopher of the ancient Greeks, would say, hey, poor people are poor because they're stupid, they suck, they deserve to die. Okay, that's just how it was. No one cared about the poor. Okay, the Carolingian Renaissance with Charlemagne was a big step forward with Alcuin and schooling. Scholastic Renaissance with Albert the Great, Thomas Aquinas, later Abelard and Eloise and others. The Italian Renaissance, the Victorian Age Renaissance with the Catholic revival of that time. The Golden Age of Europe, the Belle Epoque in France, okay? Secular rulers, since the beginning of time, they just want more power and more money. They don't care about culture and art. It's Christianity and the Catholic Church that developed these things. And it was only in Christendom that astrology became astronomy, that alchemy became chemistry. It's just a fact. And other cultures, their worldview did not inspire the scientific method. In India, for example, there's a book by Vishal Mangawadi, an Indian historian. And he said there's a concept of Maya in India which says the universe is unknowable, and so it's just an illusion. It's a waste of time to try to do anything. Okay? Or people talk about meditation, sit in the corner and stare at the wall and say Om. That doesn't inspire great achievement. Thomas Aquinas inspires achievement. He says, we are created in the image of God, and to be like God, we honor him by studying his creation, by studying nature. Okay, and since we're created in his image and he's a rational God, we are rational beings, and we can study him. We can understand things. It's worth the effort. Okay, in his book on Catholicism and Science Through the Ages, Philip Campbell wrote that the God of the Bible was a rational God, and he created the universe and us in his image so we can understand his creation. In the Bible, Book of Wisdom 11:20, it says, God has arranged all things by measure and by number and by weight. This is another confirmation that the universe was rational. I tell you all these things because right now Christianity is being removed from the world, destroyed. And you can take my word on it. If you get rid of Christianity in the world, you will have nothing but brutality and third world barbarism. Okay? That's just a fact. The billionaires will have a little place for themselves. They're just going to get rid of all the proles. They consider the proles vermin, scum, okay? Just morons who populate the world. They're worth nothing to them, okay? And so that's what's coming. People think slavery can't come back. They don't understand. Atheism is the justification for slavery. It's the justification for the Soviet Union. Because if you go by the Christian Bible, Genesis, man is created in the image of God, therefore he's part divine as well as part beast. He's entitled to natural rights, free speech, the right to privacy, the right to property, okay, the right to be not abused, okay? But if you just say man is like atheistic Darwinism, he's just related to the chimps, he's just an accident of evolution of no intrinsic significance, then he's a farm animal owned by the secular ruler. And power nowadays means money. And who's got the money? The billionaires. And what do the billionaires want? They want to reduce the number of people on this planet because they think it's overpopulated and all the scummy poor people are polluting the rivers, polluting the sky, and there's just too darn many of them, okay? So the only thing that got rid of slavery was Christianity. Other religions did not get rid of slavery. Other cultures did not get rid of slavery. Slavery still exists big time in Africa, big time in India, okay? Soviet Union is essentially slavery, okay? The farmers would grow all this food and then it would just be all taken away from them, okay? All right, let's see what else is next. G.K. Chesterton, belief in a rational universe with natural laws requires a belief in a natural lawgiver, which is God. Stanley Yaki, physicist, everywhere in the world except in Christendom, science was stillborn. I'm going to show some of the great scientists in chronological order. And here's another quote by Pierre Duhem. The claim that there is antagonism between the scientific mind and the Christian mind is one of the most colossal, boldest lies that have ever been attempted to trick the human race. All of the steam engines in the world could not have built Chartres Cathedral without the love of mankind for the Virgin Mary. That's right. Back in the 1200s, they were building these magnificent cathedrals, Notre Dame, Chartres, and all these other ones, with like next to no technology, because they loved God and they wanted to make an honoring monument to him. Okay? That's incredible. Now, what are you going to compare to that? The pyramids of Egypt? You know, the pyramids are just a triangle made by a bunch of slaves. Okay, that's nothing compared to a cathedral. Are you kidding me? And how morbid is that? Making a tomb for the pharaoh, okay? A bunch of slaves making a tomb for the pharaoh, okay? And the Greeks, they, like, you know, Edith Hamilton said, they had a beautiful theater, okay? The Christians have a beautiful cathedral. It's for everybody. It's not just for the pharaoh, because it honors. The greatest honor ever paid to the peasant, the common man, is to say he's created in the image of God, rather than just a farm animal owned by the ruler. Stanley Yaki, without the Virgin Mary's child, there would be no engines, locomotives, or other creations embodying the science of motion. Christianity is what led to all this. It's just a fact, and anybody who tries to deny that, tell them to open a book. This has been well known for a long time. Okay, here's one of another quote, Dr. Yaki, okay, from the Bible, from the book of Sirach. He said, "Even to the death you should fight for truth, and the Lord your God will fight for you." All right, now I'm going to show you a little bit about Stanley Yaki's Tree of Science. This is this physicist guy. Basically, the giant root feeding science, which was developed by the Roman Catholic Church, by the men, not by the women, came from ancient Greece. But then everything else, for the most part, came from the Roman Catholic Church. A little bit came from Rome, but Romans mostly just copied the Greeks. They didn't do much new or original. And then we got tiny little contributions from the other cultures, South America, early North America, China, Japan, Korea, the Caribbean, from women, from India, from Islam, from Africa, from Egypt, and the Middle East. Just tiny little, next to nothings. Okay, it's just a fact. I know a few things came from other places, but so little it's virtually insignificant. Here's a funny quote. Jacques Monod, French biochemist, winner of a Nobel Prize. He says, "A curious thing about the theory of evolution is everybody thinks they understand it." And if you talk to the average chump on the street, they're going to say, "Oh, evolution explains origin of life and the origin of species." No, it doesn't. It explains microevolution. It can explain microevolution, variation within a species. It doesn't explain macroevolution. It does not explain the origin of life on planet Earth. It does not explain the origin of complexity, meaning the different body types, the different phyla, which came about in the Cambrian expansion, for example. And there's no transitional form fossils to explain that, okay? Neo-Darwinism is bogus, okay? I was an A+ student in it at Stanford University, and I've kept up with it since then. It's just a lie to make people think that there's no reason to believe in God. All right, I give them previous entire lectures on it. Okay, well, that's it for session 1 about the history of science, and we're going to start getting into the individual scientists in part 2 in the next lecture. Hope you found that interesting.